for every nation to own ID. Wakati umefika, the time has come for every nation to own ID. The time is now, the time is here for every nation to own ID. Kitambulisho muhimu kitatusaidia kulinda mipaka ya nchi. Kitambulisho muhimu kwetu Afrika kitatusaidia kudumisha undugu. The time has come, the time is now for every nation to own ID. Itatusaidia kulinda mipaka, kupunguza uhalifu, kupunguza ugaidi. ID for Africa, mama, for Africa. ID for Africa, mama, for Africa. Hey mama, hey mama, hey oh yeah, for Africa. Hey mama, hey mama, hey oh yeah, for Africa. Algeria arise, Angola arise, Benin, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cape Verde arise, Cameroon arise, Central African Republic, Chad, Comoro, Congo Republic, Cote d'Ivoire arise, Djibouti, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea arise, Ethiopia arise, Gabon arise, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea arise, Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, Lesotho arise, Liberia arise, Libya arise, Madagascar, Malawi, Mali, Mauritania, Mauritius arise, Morocco arise, Mozambique arise, Namibia, Nigeria arise, Rwanda arise, Seychelles arise, Senegal arise, Sierra Leone arise, Somalia, South Africa, Sudan, Swaziland. It is the time now to own ID. ID for Africa, mama, for Africa. ID for Africa, mama, for Africa. South Sudan arise, Tanzania arise, Togo arise, oh mama, Tunisia arise, Uganda arise.
Hello, everyone. Let me ask you to please take your seats so we can continue the session. We have a lot to catch up and more interesting things are coming. So in the meantime, let me call Rosemary from Uganda, Mavuso from South Africa, and Edson from Tanzania to the stage. If you're in the hall, please come to the stage. In Abidjan, 5 days before the opening of the annual general meeting of the ID for Africa movement for
Actually,
2026. a lot of people do not have any idea of what it takes to build
Rosemary.
the ID for Africa annual general meeting. It actually is an enormous amount of work that goes
Yes,
into
the
it.
next
It's
one.
not just the program that takes a year for us to build, but also all the hundreds of workers and the collaborative work that has to take place with a lot of people coming from different partners, different service providers to build the stands, the booths. So we're here actually in a noisy area, but it's the area where they are working around the clock to build the stands. There are about 150 of them this year, and they will feature the latest and greatest ID solutions coming from all over the world. This is work that has to be done very much on time. There's a level of dependency where people depend on each other. Everything has to be brought in on
Please
time.
take your
Everything
seat.
has to be completed on time. Whether it's the frame, whether it is
Please take your seat.
the banners that have to be printed,
We're about
whether
to
it's the
start.
carpets, whether it's the electricity that has to be supplied. Nothing is done with plug and play. There's a lot of customization that needs to take place, needs to reflect the reality and the requirements and the needs.
Can
Of
I
course,
please
there's
ask
an
you
initial
to
level of
take your
planning,
seats?
but then after that, it is to the artisanal workers who are on site and who need to be customizing.
Wait. Please take your seat. We are going to start. We're going to confront a reality that is often avoided. Identity systems cost money, significant recurring money, but they also create value. Tanzania, can you please be on stage? The question is not whether identity is a public good. We all know it is. The real question is how to sustain operations of identity systems. This aligns directly with the idea that identity systems are no longer projects. They are permanent digital public infrastructure, and like all infrastructure, they must be sustained. We're fortunate to have with us 3 countries that have taken important steps in creating recurring revenue models that can help sustain their identity authorities: Uganda, South Africa, and Tanzania. Tanzania, if anybody knows if Tanzania is out, please let them know that we are expecting them on stage. Maybe in the meantime, we can launch a Slido poll. We can launch a poll to get you engaged. Operator, could you please launch a poll? All 3 actors. Yes, Edson, thank you. All 3 representatives were with us in this morning's session. So we are asking the poll, please use your phone. At the end of the day, who should pay to sustain identity systems? Taxpayers, private sector, individual end users, or a balanced mix of all 3? Could you please participate in the poll? It would be good to have your perspective. We value your perspective. We're trying to understand who should pay for identity systems. Please scan. If you're not able to scan it on the screen, you can scan it in the back of the event guide. It is on the screen. In the meantime,
So one thing is very clear that individual end users should never pay for identity services. We could see a competition between a mix of all these plus taxpayers. So you're believing that the government is responsible, the budget is responsible, etc. Okay, we can keep it going. I want to start with an opening question to our illustrious panelists. I want to start by asking the question, should identity data be monetized as a cost recovery mechanism to help sustain identity systems? In other words, is revenue essential for sustainability? And I'll start with you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Dr. Atik. The question that begs is, should identity data be monetized? We need to take like 2 steps back. How is identity data collected, stored, and delivered? Is there a cost to it? If there is a cost to it, there must be a way of addressing that cost. The economic reality of identity data is their inflows and their outflows. And the question must be answered on both sides. What are the inflows? The costs that sustain the identity technologies and the identity. It's not just technology. The act of enrollment, I'll give you an example of Uganda. Our most recent implementation cost $63.5 million. That's just the technology story, even before I go to the bigger story. The cost of data, as we have it today, in our monetized example, is we sell 3 cents for verification, 14 cents per dollar, I'm using the dollar, 14 cents for access and use, close to $2.50 for birth certificates for late registration. For timely registration, there is no cost. So in essence, the point is, there is a cost. Identity technologies are not cheap. I'll pick 2 of the most expensive. The automated biometric identity in ABIS, and the PKI, or the underlying technologies for securing encryption and decryption. They are not common intellectual property, and they cost, I hate to say, an arm and a leg. So in essence, we must define a way of sustaining those technologies, since Africa is still young in development of the same. The other, in back ends and what, I know Africa is getting its foot there, but there's still 2 core underpinning technologies in which I have not had research in any university in Africa, in PKI, and I've not had research in ABIS. So I dare say we must monetize it to sustain the operation of the identity, since we cannot deny its impact on economic development.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the head of the Identity Authority of Uganda is in favor of monetizing identity data to sustain the operations of the Identity Authority and also the services. Let's go to South Africa. Let's get your view on this question. Just a quick round.
No, thank you very much. My view is that we cannot place that responsibility 100% on the taxpayer, because the earlier owner spoke about verification. We are actually enabling private sector to be able to generate a lot of profits out of the ability to use identity systems as the trusted source for verifying the clients that they are dealing with, their customers. And in return, they generate revenue because they know that this person can be verified from the trusted source. Now, the private sector tends to complain when, for an example, the systems are down There's no reliability on the verification in terms of availability. So therefore, for governments to be able to give that service that is 99% uptime, we need to invest in infrastructure, and that money ought to come from. So earlier question that on the poll that you were asking, so there was a last part that says, do we want a mix? My view is that yes, at the foundation, you could use the government tax base or the revenue to implement, but moving forward, you need private sector to come on board because they want the services to enable them not to lose on any transaction so that they can be able to identify the client. And then the last part, obvious, the users do pay a minimal amount. For an example, if at birth you register the child for free in South Africa, your first ID is free, but when you come back to now, whether it's lost, damaged, you have got to pay because the first one has been given for free. So we are not placing the burden on the user, but all what we are saying is that the repeat business, you ought to pay for it. So my view, you have to monitor data to generate revenue to invest back in your infrastructure, because IT infrastructure, I mean, you look at your data centers that you need the connectivity that you need, the port cost that you need, expanding the footprint. There are so many things. So you need a robust infrastructure investment in that. So that money must come from somewhere else, because you cannot, private sector has a tendency to privatize profit and to nationalize debt. So in this instance, we want to also benefit from the profits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you are also in agreement that it's inevitable identity data must be monetized. Let's hear Tanzania.
Thank you, Dr. Atik. Government has invested a lot in the 3 or 4 cost centers. Number 1 is enrollment. Mass enrollment of all citizens and embedding database is very expensive. Number 2, the government has invested in data centers. We have 2 data centers. One is active data center, which is main, and another is the backup data centers. Also, we have invested on the security because we need to safeguard the data we are maintaining. So the security part of the system is also the cost. And also, as you know, maintaining data centers is expensive. You have to pay for power, you have to pay for connectivity. All these require money, and the government has invested on those cost centers. So the issue is, the aim of establishing national ID is to deliver value. People can now, previous to open bank account, it require 2 to 3 days. To acquire SIM card, it acquire 1 or 2 days to acquire SIM card after completing the documentation. But after having the national ID with the government investment, now you can open account instantly. You can acquire SIM card anytime. So this value which the government brought to the citizen, efficiency to the company, private sector, is not free. Anything free is not valuable.
Yes.
Yes, because the national ID system and the national ID ecosystem bring value to first to the citizen. It unlock everything. It gives access to everything seamlessly without any delay. Also for the private sector, they can do their business instantly without any delay. So this value, which is brought by national ID, cannot be free.
Yeah.
And the good thing, government does not charge to recover. They charge as a contribution. We invested maybe X amount. Just pay 10% of it, just as to sustain operations.
Maintenance.
Maintenance only. So
Right.
even the charge is not based to the recovery of infrastructure, upward of infrastructure, just to maintain. Because once you are connected with the private sector, they need 9.99 availability.
Yes, availability. Mhm.
So ensuring this availability, you need to invest.
Yes.
So where do we get this investment? So to sustain national ID on our side as Tanzania, we see there is a need to monetize these
Right.
identity services. But what we recommend, don't transfer this charge to citizen. The private sector should bear the charge.
Yes.
And also for us, yes, we need cost recovery.
Yes.
But we don't need a cost recovery on ID issuance.
Yes.
Issuance of ID in Tanzania, either physical or digital, is free.
Let's pick up the pace a little bit. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that the old thinking that identity is about an administrative register and giving people a card to identify themselves, and it's a responsibility of the state, that's an outdated model. We cannot function like that anymore. You have to be service-oriented customers, thinking of people as customers, and customers expect availability, value add, and for that, we should set the expectation that there needs to be a healthy stream, a healthy business model. So let's continue this discussion. I mean, Rosemary, you have developed, even though they were giving you the ability to charge very little, you have developed a revenue stream, even you're not fully functional yet. What guidance would you offer to your peers on building their business model? How should they think about pricing? Is it the law that should dictate it, or is it the market that should dictate it?
Identity systems create value. So, one thing we must identify in the business model is who do they create value
Yes.
for? So, who is interested in verifying identity? He who is interested in verifying identity should pay the price to verify. Because I am who I am, but someone is interested in knowing who I am. That person will pay the price for establishing identity. In our current business model as government is waived
Yes.
from paying for verification. It's a model that we are beginning to negotiate with government. Look, NIRA pays taxes
Yes.
when we bring in goods. We pay to another government institution taxes. So it's okay for another government institution to pay to us the cost of verification. In our computations, we need up to 20 to 30 million transactions a month for us to break even in terms of verification at the same cost of 3 cents, which means we are currently at 8. So either we drive up, we increase the service base of the value, identify other people who want to identify people, and the payment fintech infrastructure. If today government got a national payment switch, that will quadruple as it did in India.
Okay.
When UPI came on ground, it became clear where identification came to. So in essence, the question I would say is,
Who's
interested? Who is obtaining value?
Yes.
But I will use my analogy I used earlier on. It's a dance. A day is coming when, even when I'm verified, I would like to get something back. That day is not far from today. But for starters, let us get the one who is verifying to pay. And maybe in the near sweet by and by, when I am verified, I would receive
Some benefit.
some benefit.
Some
from it.
benefit. Okay.
Thank you.
That sounds very interesting. I think this is a market-driven mentality. We should ask who's benefiting from identity. Are they paying their fair share of the cost? And therefore, we should analyze this as from an economic point of view. I want to come to South Africa. South Africa, when you announced the increase in the fee for online verification of identity from 0.15 Rand to 10 Rands, I actually saw this as a clear move towards sustainability, and I applauded it. I said, finally, they're doing something. Yet it triggered a strong uproar and negative reaction from the industry and the public. I was very surprised. But my question is twofold. Were you surprised by this reaction? And second, how did you ultimately justify and stand by your decision?
No, thank you very much. Well, we were surprised by the reaction from the private sector. But the first thing I want to clarify is that we're not charging other government departments because we believe that the police needs data to verification to identify criminals. The health sector needs data to verify citizenship of people and so forth. There's many other actors, social grant, social services. They need to know that the grant they're paying the right person. But when it comes to the private sector, I mean, for many years, they've been paying 16 cents, which we believe that out of that, a lot of profits were generated, and they were not able to sustain the infrastructure. In other words, they were utilizing public infrastructure to generate private profit, which I think it's not a very good model, really. We want them even to contribute to the upgrade of the infrastructure. And what we are charging them is not a fee that will generate huge amounts for government to have profits. It's just minimal for us to be able to keep the lights on. In other words, 10 rand, which is just 60 cents in dollars.
Yes.
I do believe that it's quite a very insignificant amount for them. So we had a legal challenge by the sector,
Yes.
but not all players in the sector, which has since been dropped. They've withdrawn the legal challenge. They are going to comply because the value for them in getting data verification outweighs their legal challenge and also the amount that they need to pay. So we are on track now. I think everybody is there. The public did not have an uproar. It's the captains of the industries that had an issue with it because they don't want to part ways. Some state-owned companies, they did raise the issue that we are partially owned by the state, and even though they are private shareholders. So we treat that separately and differently. So we are reviewing that when it comes to those. But those that are 100% private owned, we are not backing off on our changes. Thank you.
Excellent. So you stood your ground and you won at the end, and now it's become acceptable that private banks will pay the fee. Very good. Excellent. So, in fact, it was not random. I saw some of the statements that you made. You said cost recovery was necessary. Fees had not changed for over a decade. So it's been, and it's needed to fix the systems and fund modernization. And so you've been subsidizing the private companies by the taxpayers. So all those are valid arguments, and I think we can learn from South Africa how they handled the situation, and were transparent in bringing this forward. I want to go to Tanzania. Tanzania, I was surprised, and I may be completely wrong, when I heard that there is legal constraints in the law that puts a cap on how much the identity authority can charge for identity verification. Is that correct? And if it's correct, how do you ensure that this is not outdated? So talk to us about what the law says about your ability to charge for services.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atik. In our regulation, we are supposed to charge 500 shillings per transaction for each successful transaction, and which is equivalent to 19 cents.
So 500 shillings is the cap?
Yes,
It's the cap, and it's put in by law?
by regulation, yes.
By regulation?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so this, this amount was calculated more than 10 years back.
Yes.
So if you quit to the dollar, that means at this moment you have to do the revision, because the equivalence now is not that much. If you compare 500 by then to that to dollar, now you have to charge more than maybe 20, 21, 23 US dollar per transaction, and this is in the regulation. And this fee is only for KYC. Know your customer. So we charge 500 per transaction for knowing your customer verifications. So yes, as you said, this is outdated and we need to review it. And we as government, we are working on it to make sure we have introduced other charges as well. Not only KYC, we need to introduce authentication, yes and no. For those, suppose I'm a bank, I'm already registered or open account for a customer. Then when the customer come to withdraw or to do any bank transaction, we need an yes and no verification or authentication. So using ID credential, because this will be as many as possible, the price will be much small because we expect to have a much transaction from this revenue stream.
So you're creating other services
Yes.
that are maybe more accessible, cheaper,
Yes.
and that they can become big volume.
Yes, because the aim is to have many institutions connected to the national ID. Currently, we have 147 institutions. So we need to increase the number. Once we increase the number, we increase the revenue stream automatically. If volume increase, the price goes down. So this is what we are heading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, Rosemary, I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest cost driver today? You said ABIS and PKI. Go ahead. There are two more.
Identity data, biometrics.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have the largest data center data storage store in town. This is in going to from 600 TB to a petabyte. Now,
The data center,
the data, the
the
data,
storage.
the data we have,
Mhm.
the data sites.
Mm.
So compute and storage also have a cost.
Mm.
So in essence, we need to look at it in two ways. Do we diversify the revenue streams? Do we reduce the cost centers? So we move one cost center we shut down was the licensed vendor locked. But it's not, it still doesn't get free. Sometimes when you say open source, people think it becomes free. No,
It's not.
it is not free. There is still a cost because compute has a cost, and storage has a cost.
Electricity is a cost.
Electricity has a cost. Cooling has a cost. So there is the data center cost. There is the technology cost, the the PKI and the ABIS. And if you allow me to compare like with like in our economy, if you were verifying an MTN number whose backbone is an ID, it costs 90 cents. But they are being charged 3 cents for that verification. But to the public, when you wish to verify a number, a telephone number, they cost 2,500 shillings, which is 90 cents. So in essence, there is additional value being created. And I think what identity authorities need to understand is to understand the path of value. Uganda was removed from the grey list the moment they could identify payers. So it's a snowballing effect. And I think it is important that we need to, one, structure the services. There is KYC, there is SIM registration, but we need to begin to structure services and see value. And where there is a snowballing effect, go on to reap from the snowballing effect. Thank you.
Ambassador Mavuso, the critics would argue that the reason identity verification is so costly is because you're implementing highly centralized identity verification models which require availability, service level agreements that are very unrealistic in the context of Africa. Some would say there are other models such as decentralized, verifiable credentials on mobile platforms that would significantly reduce the cost of the transaction to you. Do you think we are at a point here where increasing the cost of the verification is not the right path? finding new technologies that can lower the cost to you might be. Where are you thinking on that balance between changing the model technologically to lower its cost?
Well, we're quite happy to explore different models, but at this stage, in order for us to secure the database, centralization for us becomes important, because if you were to decentralize, you're also creating a lot of vulnerability of the data in the process. So our view is that we have a central database. The biggest issue that we need to look at working with telecommunication companies is how to reduce the cost of connectivity, because that's where the problem would be. We have thought about that. For an example, when you have rural offices, your mobile trucks, that mobile offices that goes to rural areas. So you're not able to enroll when there's no connectivity. So the issue of decentralization in that instance can work, because you're then able to get a positive return when you do enrollment. But the risk of that is associated with it at this point is still quite huge, but it's something that we ought to explore. That is why our view is that in areas where we don't have connectivity, satellite will become much more an option if we get satellite connectivity, which will reduce the cost of connectivity. But at this point, I mean, we utilize things like your fiber connectivity, your LTE connectivity, which is very huge because in terms of cost, because the telecommunication companies have got to invest in connectivity in the towers, but in areas that are mountainous, it becomes even more difficult if someone is living below the mountain and the tower is on top of the mountain, so there's no signal there. So those are the things that drive the cost of connectivity, which is something, as I said, we ought to look at other options like satellite connectivity for us will work much better in South Africa, particularly where the areas that are mountainous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will be exploring the decentralization dimension, not in the next panel, but the one after it. We're running out of time for this panel, so I want to finish by asking Tanzania, which is another point that the critics would point out, which is that there is a tension between financial sustainability and undermining inclusion and ecosystem participation, and also sometimes public trust. They would accuse the identity authority to say you're trying to make money. So how would you respond to critics who argue that pricing identity services risks limiting access?
Yes, when we face that criticism, the only thing we say to the stakeholders, does national ID bring value to you? If they say it brings value, does it simplify the way you are doing business if you compare before national ID and after national ID? Suppose national ID is not there. Are you going to be impacted, or you are going to be impacted? They are saying you are going to be impacted. And the second thing, you have the national ID. You open bank account without doing anything. No customer due diligence, nothing. You just open bank account. What does it mean? You transfer risk 100% to the national ID authority. So this risk transfer, is it for free? So there is this kind of argument and this kind of response we give to them. Previously it was very hard, but now they do understand. Anything which is valuable need to be paid. So for banks and telecoms, now we are in the same page. This is minimum and just a contribution. It's like when you go to a coffee bar, you just pay a tip. Is it a cost?
But don't you worry that the telecoms and the banks are going to pass this cost to the consumer, to the end user? Therefore, banking becomes more expensive, phone services become more expensive. How do you view that?
Yes, we have been discussed with them several times, and they also try to convince them or to pursue them, don't pass this cost to the users, because this is very minimum cost. And
Okay.
for operation, for them, it brings efficiency. There is no need to pass the cost to the consumers.
So in reality, you're generating tremendous value to them, and you're charging a small value, small cost, small fee, and therefore you must, perhaps even we need regulations that basically says that the service providers cannot necessarily price this in. I don't know how you can impose that, but it's an important topic, and I would say that civil society that I spoke to, we hear you, we are concerned as well about the inclusion and access. We ran out of time for this, but not the topic. The topic will continue. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask South Africa to stay on the stage, and then I'm going to ask Nigeria Identity Authority to come on the stage, and we will be joined by Baker Burikuja, who is from the National Personal Data Protection Director. He's going to be, he's also ID for Africa Deputy Ambassador Uganda. So please take the seat of the Director General of NIRA, Rosemary, thank you. And yes, please. And then Silver Kofi Asua, who's the Department Head in Compliance and Rights Protection from the ARTCI regulator in Cote d'Ivoire. So please take the seat. Nigeria and then Cote d'Ivoire. Okay, so we're going to continue this discussion. At the center of everything we have discussed lies one asset: identity data. It is the fuel of the Identity Authority that can provide what is necessary for sustainability. We've heard this is necessary, but it also could create existential risks to individuals as more data accumulates. This tension is normal, and it is healthy for us to talk about openly and explicitly, not to judge, but to understand the different points of view. This is the tension of the identity data economy. So we're going to focus on the data economy. So we're now going to explore how do we govern data responsibly while still unlocking its value. As I said, we have with us two representatives of data protection authorities and two representatives of identity authorities. So let us kick out this session with a poll. Could you please put up the poll? Given the amount of time that we had to be delayed by the presence of the opening ceremony, we are going to suspend the Slido for these two sessions. So we may resume them, but please go with the poll. So read the poll. And while the poll is being developed on the screen, I want an opening position from everyone. 1 minute, please, rapid fire. Every panelist, I want to give you each 1 minute to define your opening position. So, starting with Uganda, in less than a minute, is there an inherent tension between enabling identity systems to create value and ensuring strong data protection in your country? Again, high level, 1 minute. Uganda.
Thank you, Dr. Atik. In Uganda's perspective, there isn't a tension because of the safeguards that have been built in how this is done, starting with the law requiring that the Data Protection and Privacy Act around usage of data, which can also include at a fee. But also with the Registration of Persons Act, it has regulations that speak specifically to that. So in our context, starting with the law, but also the training and the technology that the Executive Director of NIRA Uganda talked of, that tension isn't there. What I'll be highlighting later on is, in practice, beyond the law and the Identity Authority implementing that, but those now that pay the fee, what do they deal with the data with beyond being granted access?
So do you feel there is a tension?
The tension is there. It's mainly around what we call secondary use.
Secondary use.
So someone pays, either it's verification, a yes or no, from the identity authority, but where they are given access, where consent has been obtained and other legal safeguards followed, that tension is of them collecting and creating another database that they can possibly use for other purposes beyond what they indicated to the identity authority for use.
Okay, so we have to be vigilant to ensure that that tension does not become very real. South Africa, what's your opening position?
Well, I think one of the important thing for us is that data sovereignty is a very important asset to us because we view the issue, particularly on identity, that government must keep ownership and control. We know that we want to innovate, but in the process, and also including private sector participation. But the most important thing is that we should not lose control of data in these instances, because if we do, we're running a risk of losing a national asset. So that will be our thinking at this point, and we are actually working to ensure that the state keeps active control in the data sovereignty.
So you will maintain control, but you will leverage the value of that data without losing control. That's your message.
That's correct.
Okay. Nigeria, please.
So we are leveraging the value of our data at the moment from a verification stance. Our verification partners they're equivalent to trust service providers. We just call them verification partners. So what we have is we have an aggregator system and a verification partner system where the aggregators are like the main wholesale resellers of the data, not resellers of the data access, and then the verification partners, the SOP access level. So it's a tiered level approach that we have done. And what we've also done with it is we have moved from a postpaid system, because we realized a lot of people were owing us money across, the private sector and government agencies. So what we have done is ensure that we have a prepaid wallet-based approach where you pay for that through the credit. So you top up your wallet with credits, and you're able to continue to provide verification or API-based calls to wherever your clients are within the country. So we have done that successfully. But what we've also done is to crash the price. We had to do a pricing review to increase participation in the ecosystem, and that has been successful so far, because from inception till now, we've done over 2.2 billion verification calls. So we have monetized that data or maximized the NIN, but without obviously selling the data as a whole. So you have to go through the API calls. But something important that we have also done is to say, okay, for government, even though we've given them a subsidized rate, we're currently reviewing how we can ensure that government doesn't pay for that data, to make sure every single person is onboarded. But what is also critical with that is to ensure that for us to be able to do this, we want to obviously have like a levy fee. So for example, from the tax, we can have 1%. We're proposing 1% of the levy fee to cover the cost of ensuring that every ministry, department, and agencies can integrate as easily as possible based on all the use cases that they have.
But you don't see an inherent tension between wanting to exploit the data and also data protection laws in your country. You're saying we find ways to give them answers and assurances and trust without disclosing data. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay, so actually let's hear from Cote d'Ivoire. This is just an opening statement about the inherent tension between the two ends of the spectrum, data exploitation and data protection.
Oui, Dr. Arctic, bien entendu, il existe des tensions. Parce que faut dire que les entreprises exploitent les données à caractère personnel bien avant que les lois sur la protection des données à caractère personnel ne soient adoptées. Et donc, il y a toute une question de conduite de changement. Il y a une question de sensibilisation. Et Après, il y a aussi l'aspect de la réutilisation des données. Les entreprises n'ont pas encore eu le réflexe de revenir vers le régulateur à chaque fois qu'ils décident de changer de finalité. Donc, bien entendu, il y a des tensions. On essaie avec la méthodologie et avec la technique de leur faire comprendre.
Okay, so we could see that, you know, we are in the same family, but even within the same family, there is a tension. The identity authorities are comfortable that there is no tension. The data protection authorities are actually concerned. They see that there is a tension. But let's actually drill down and understand this better. I'm going to go to Nigeria and ask you, in Africa, do you think data minimization is realistic for a modern data-driven economy? Data minimization, just to remind people, is the principle that data protection uses, which says collect the minimal set of data to establish existence and uniqueness and nothing more. But let's talk about Africa. DG.
My honest opinion is data minimization doesn't work for Africa.
Data minimization
Doesn't work.
doesn't work for
Doesn't
Africa.
work for Africa. So even though the idea around data minimization is for us to be able to sort of cut or half the processing time for collection of data. But I will tell you that with the expanding use cases that we have in Nigeria, for example, around the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, we need to ensure that we are able to collect the necessary key data upfront to be able to enable those use cases at a very fast pace. And I'll give you an example. We have the population census, which is national population census, which is carried out once in every 10 years. And we are definitely going to do that at some point in time. The data has not been announced. But what we have said is it's going to be a biometric-enabled census that will take place, which means that it will rely on the identity that has been already validated by NINSI. So which means that and that way we save costs. So rather than giving them money to carry out duplicate information, they validate on the existing data and then able to then, continue to do what needs to be done in real time.
So let me underline this, because data minimization is something that the development agencies, a lot of privacy organizations advocate, and we need to be sensitive to this fault line, because data minimization in economies that are impoverished with data may not make sense. So you've heard it from the head of the largest identity authorities in Africa. So we need to think differently. We need to think differently. So data minimization is something we need to put a circle around and ask ourselves the question, how do we and what do we collect? And I would go to Uganda with that, because over-collection and function creep. How do you evaluate whether the number of data fields collected is proportional to the stated purpose? You've just heard that data minimization doesn't make sense for an impoverished economy. So how does the Uganda Data Protection Authority view the over-collection, and how do you evaluate if something is being collected and which is not necessary or not? So give me your assessment on data over-collection. Please turn it on.
I'm in a very tricky place, between a rock and a hard place, as someone from the Data Protection Authority talking about data minimization after my colleague from Nigeria talking about that.
This is why we're here. We're not here to do soft things and easy things. We're here to face the issues that we need to deal with together. So please be straightforward and honest. If you disagree,
Sure.
100% say I disagree.
So before I get to the element of disagreeing, is to look at what is data minimization in the data protection context, which speaks to over-collection, that there are lawful grounds which are provided for in the law. Whether you're government, private sector, civil society, regardless of who you are, even if you are an individual. So it gives you these grounds, the lawful grounds, which can be used in combination of or in isolation of the other. It could be consent. Now for government, it's basically performance of a public duty by a public body. Now, the element of overcollection where it can come in, especially with government, and not necessarily registration authorities, is if they are automating their process of collection of data. Because as government, we offer a service based on either government policy, which is documented, a law, or even a guideline. But realize that most of the government agencies, when it gets to overcollection, it comes in when they are automating. They can go beyond what has been provided for in the law. What they think, oh, maybe we will need this data. And now this has even become worse with AI.
Yes.
Because they will be automating a process of responding to queries. So they will collect a lot of data and sometimes even social media profiles of some individuals. So from the data protection perspective, it poses a lot of risk because if this data is actually collected and it ends up in the wrong hands, then the individuals will not trust the system. Now, on the element of the challenge of governments or agencies in Africa not having enough data, because as you heard, the authorities were here in the morning. Most of them are around the ones that have performed well, 70% covered of the population, some are 20%. Those are low numbers. It does not mean that increasing those numbers of collection, you collect everything about that person. These laws which are implemented and established for these entities, the collection should be tapped to that. But from Uganda's perspective, the challenge of overcollection, where we see it as data protection authorities, is around these other people that put the data to secondary use. So if someone goes to the identity authority and they get either the consent of the person, probably to register a SIM card, but later they realize that this person fits a particular profile and they can market a particular product to them. Then they collect the data, they retain the data which was accessed during the verification or authentication, whichever channel used, and then match it with other data they collect at that particular point.
So you're basically more concerned about the function creep, about the use of the data for secondary purposes than necessarily about collection of data where you got the consent from the citizen to say, these are the fields that I need to give consent to. But function creep means using data for purposes that were not declared in the first place.
That is correct.
Yes, and so I want to go to the Cote d'Ivoire precisely about this point, because in many cases, identity data collected for one purpose is later used for others, not originally declared to the citizen. At what point does legal interpretation become a way to bypass purpose limitation? For example, can governments invoke national interest to bypass purpose limitation? For example, if we're talking about KYC and anti-money laundering, I could argue, or somebody could argue, that anti-money laundering is a threat to, money laundering is a threat to the nation. And therefore, even though you don't tell the citizen that, the government can invoke that privilege. How do you feel about the use of interpretation by government to justify the use of the data beyond the statement that was given to the citizen? This is not a theoretical question, because we have countries where KYC for banks had to be shut down because when the law was adopted, it did not anticipate that it would be used for anti-money laundering. Could you please elaborate on this? Whether interpretation is acceptable, whether the law has flexibility to allow national interest to be used.
Oui, je pense que la question de la minimisation des données est une question de positionnement. Il faut d'abord concevoir la minimisation des données comme un outil de gouvernance des données et pas comme une interdiction de traiter les données. Dès lors qu'on part sur ce point, je pense qu'on finit déjà de régler tout le problème. Bien évidemment, toutes les lois relatives à la protection des données à caractère personnel prévoient des exceptions. Bon, pour le cas de la Côte d'Ivoire, vous trouverez au niveau de l'article 2 de la loi du 19 juin 2013 relative à la protection des données à caractère personnel une toute première exception. Et cette exception, elle dit que le gouvernement peut sortir du champ d'application de la loi tous les traitements de données à caractère personnel pour des motifs d'intérêt public, des motifs de sécurité et de défense. Et c'est clairement là, cette première exception, il s'agit bien entendu de sortir du champ d'application. À partir de ce moment, la loi sur la protection des données à caractère personnel ne va plus s'appliquer à ce traitement. Ça, c'est le premier choix que peut faire l'État de Côte d'Ivoire ou alors n'importe quel État qui souhaiterait traiter les données. D'autres exceptions aussi figurent dans la loi, et notamment au niveau même du consentement, au niveau de ce qu'on peut appeler le principe de la légitimité. À partir de ce moment, vous avez tout ce qu'il y a intérêt public, vous avez tout ce qu'il y a comme relation contractuelle. Tous ces éléments permettent bien entendu de collecter les données à caractère personnel sans revenir vers l'utilisateur et même vers l'autorité de protection des données. Donc bien entendu, nous, dans la mise en œuvre de la loi, dans l'application, en tant que régulateur, je le rappelle très bien, nous sommes régulateurs, nous ne sommes pas des juges. Donc en tant que régulateurs, nous avons des outils qui sont assez souples, donc qui nous permettent de rechercher pratiquement dans tous les secteurs d'activité quel est le dispositif légal qui permet à telle entreprise de traiter plus de données à caractère personnel. À partir de ce moment-là, nous autorisons systématiquement. Donc, lorsque la loi prévoit, lorsqu'un règlement prévoit, lorsqu'il y a nécessité, évidemment, le régulateur applique ces dispositions-là. Donc, on n'est pas vraiment fermé, on ne peut pas déroger à la loi parce qu'on est censé exécuter la loi.
Mais la loi de protection de données à caractère personnel était adoptée à quel moment? When was the law in Côte d'Ivoire for data protection adopted? More than 10 years ago.
Elle a été adoptée en 2013.
2013.
Oui.
2013. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'on a besoin de faire une mise à jour dans la loi pour adopter la loi à la réalité actuelle de l'économie actuelle, du monde actuel? Do you think these laws, a lot of countries in Africa adopted laws in the first wave. Do we think we need to really revisit the laws and update them to reflect the current realities of data economies and AI and mobile, etc.? What's your view?
Oui, quand bien même que les principes fondamentaux demeurent assez pertinents, il est évident aujourd'hui qu'avec tout ce qu'il y a comme technologie innovante, il faut obligatoirement adapter la loi. Il faut l'adapter pour la rendre, je dirais, pour faire de telle sorte qu'elle soit en phase avec tout ce qu'il y a comme nouvelle technologie. Donc nous avons l'intelligence artificielle qui vient apporter beaucoup plus. Nous avons tout ce qu'il y a comme neurotechnologie. Nous avons pas mal l'identité numérique, les wallets numériques, tous ces éléments apportent du nouveau. C'est pour ça que nos lois sur la protection des données à caractère personnel doivent évoluer et opter surtout pas pour des réglementations dures, mais des réglementations souples qui permettent aux régulateurs de pouvoir, au cas par cas, prendre des décisions qui sont favorables à l'économie.
So, in reality, it's not done to say we have a data protection law in our country. You have to understand how you move from laws to regulations, how do you update the laws, and how do you update the regulations. Tomorrow in the front line, there is a session by the Commissioner of Mauritius, who's going to talk about their vision, her vision on this very same topic, which is very interesting to explore. Let me go to South Africa and ask you, what is your governance mechanism that you have to decide which fields to collect? Is there a committee? Is there a public hearing? How do you govern what fields to collect? Or you just decide that you and the Director General, this is what we want?
No, thank you very much. No, we, in the Identification Act, you have defined what you need to collect. Obviously, it's quite important to collect the gender of the child, the name given, and all those. So those are some of the fields. But as time evolves, you're then beginning to need additional fields to be able to collect. But also not only that, we need new biometrics because in the past we only relied on a photo that was not very, what you call a digital photo, but also relied on fingerprint. As we move forward now, we believe that we're now collecting different types of biometrics. I mean, you need your iris, you need your facial recognition, because we deal with cases of people who've got amputated. For an example, you deal with someone, the minutia on their fingerprint is fading, either because they're working in the construction industry or because of the texture of their skin. There are many cases where you need to be able to verify. So if you collect multiple biometrics, that is quite helpful in order for you to be able to identify a person. But not only that, in registration or in enrollment, you also need to be able to create a family tree. In order for us, I mean, you raised an issue earlier on about organizations that are fighting against over collection of data. The issue for me is that you have to collect as much data as possible, because we're dealing with cases of a late registration of birth where the person has no mother, has no father, has no relative. How do you then authenticate that this person is the citizen? So in order for us to be able to reduce the scandal of invisibility and statelessness, you need to collect as much data as possible to try and actually link this individual to some family or parent.
But how do you make your case? Is there a body that you go to them and say, I want this, I want this, I want this because of the following reasons, and the committee studies it and approves it? Who decides, who governs what fields to collect?
Well, it's governed by the department. Obviously, we have to go to parliament if you do legislation and indicate this is the type of legislation we want to pass. Recently, we've published the regulations trying to amend the identity regulations to try and introduce now the digital identity, because it was not catered for in the 1997 Identification Act.
Yes.
So you've got to change the regulations in order to cater for the introduction of new digital ID and other related a form of identity.
So it's not really a one and done. You never get into one and done. In the world of identity and data, you're continually having to evolve, and therefore collaboration with all the stakeholders becomes important, therefore the ecosystem becomes important. Let me just quickly go to Nigeria, and then I go to Uganda, and then I go to Cote d'Ivoire. Nigeria, have you at any time, NIMSI had to say no to a powerful stakeholder who was asking access to identity data? And if you've done, why did you deny them access?
So we've asked people, we've had this, similar instance. And we have said no, because first of all, when it comes to citizens' data, our number one job is to protect citizens' data. However, we should be able to give you access with the citizens' consent to their data. So what we have actually done is we've decentralized identity through the digital credential wallet, mobile ID, which we have worked on, which gives the citizen the right to be able to authorize or revoke access to their data. Also to lock their name, which is another feature we have, so which means if you don't want to be verifiable at all, you can lock your name. And also there's a shared code, access code on there for you to share that in-person verification at a bank, for example. And another thing that we've also done is just to allow you to be able to say, okay, this is my data. You see a list of verifiable transactions that have been done that has been granted by you. So which means, for example, if a telco verifies my identity, through the enterprise side of the application, then you see it as the individual, that this was done as so date and at so time. So you can see a list and view a list of all that has been done. That's to ensure transparency across board. So what we want to be able to ensure is that you're able to verify without you sort of stripping the citizens of their privacy rights. Across borders.
Let us say I'm a social media
company. I want to offer services, a dating app or something. I come to you, I say to NIMSI, I want to verify identity of people. Do you onboard them and then rely on consent of the individual for you to come in? Maybe the individual doesn't know that these are harmful organizations. They don't know. How do you vet the people who want to do identity verification? Not by the wallet, because we know the wallet is not that big yet, by the API.
Okay, so there's a list of documentations we will ask for. For example, so you must have a security clearance. You must be certified by the Data Protection Commission. So there is a list of different documentations that we will ask to support your evidence for you to become that. And then we obviously will do an assessment of your technical capabilities. So are you ISO certified? We'll also do a compliance audit over your infrastructure to ensure that there is no possibility of hacking, phishing activities, or anything like that.
So they have to meet a minimum certification levels before they could do this.
And then we'll then issue you a license for that to happen. So we ensure that all of our identity ecosystems are data certified and that they've met the highest level of requirements that we have a very stringent list of things to do.
That's absolutely great. I mean, it's very important to say that just because you want to verify identity, you shouldn't be allowed to verify identity without passing the checks and balances. I can name an example in my mind, but I will not name the identity authority. It happens to be not in Africa, somewhere else, that they allowed immediate access to do verification, and they ended up usurping, a malicious organization ended up usurping in a few hours 100,000 identities, including biometrics. Okay, so let me go to Uganda and bring the topic. We often rely on consent as the foundation of data protection. It's actually one of those principles. Like, we've got data minimization, we've got consent. These are the pillars of data practices that we've all lived by for the last 10 years. But at population scale, can consent genuinely be meaningful? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. The person in the street, there's an asymmetry here. I want to get something I'm willing to give you. How do you protect and turn consent into meaningful, symmetric? Please explain.
Thank you. For starters, consent is not the only ground, but where it is the justifiable ground to be able to use or access the data, the question of what is valid consent. So one, the law, Uganda's Data Protection and Privacy Act, clearly talks about that consent should be explicit, which means that a person should take an action. If you ask them, should I access your data or use it in any way, and they keep quiet or they do not respond, that cannot be termed as valid consent. And also explaining to them, being informed, because that's another aspect of it. What you're going to do the data with, if you may share it with another person, and the risks involved, those should be highlighted. Because it's only when a person is informed and is made aware of those risks, and also specific to your request, because consent is not a blanket. That person...
Is this realistic for a population that lacks basically the ability to read and write in some places? Is consent a theoretical, elitist concept, or is it realistic to implement?
No, it's not theoretical, and this is why. And we've seen it in Uganda as well. To make it realistic, especially to those who probably may not read as much, there is what is called a two-layered consent notice, whereby the first layer, you can tell the person the minimum information they should know. Within that short period of time, they'll be interacting with you. So if they need more detailed information, which it's good to know, but it's not a must at that point, they can either click somewhere, scan a QR code, talk to a person. So we always insist on that. Because if you put up all the legalese, huge document a person will not understand, and that definitely will not be valid consent. Some courts in Uganda have actually come up to enforce on what is valid consent, especially in that population. There is a case where a lady was working somewhere. Her employer told her to just stand up, and they needed to use her pictures. So she tried to inquire what the pictures would be used for, but they didn't give her enough information. So she begrudgingly accepted, and when she found her pictures on social media, court said this is not valid consent as defined in the law, and the employers were actually fined.
Do you feel civil society can play an important role here in trying to sort of help the public understand their rights and what they are entitled to by the law? Because even for people who are highly educated, sometimes we don't really know. When somebody says, give me your consent, and I would ask, what's the alternative for not giving you my consent? Does it mean I have to step aside and spend 2 hours, while if I give you consent, it's 2 minutes? How do we educate people, but also give them help in terms of understanding their rights?
Civil society, I'm not from civil society definitely, but we've worked with them, and they've helped to drive awareness on these rights, because each actor has a role to play. So as civil society, they've been helpful in breaking down the message, reaching the local communities, but also generally on ensuring that consent is well understood. As Uganda, we've adopted some best practices around transparency because it's hinged on that. So for those in school where consent ordinarily would be obtained, let's say institutions of higher learning above 18 years, there are particular UN guidance on how that message should be relayed, the language that should be used that they can relate with. Then for those who may be illiterate, imagery is also used. So we are encouraging and incorporating that in our guidance, but also us in the different actors to play that, because if a person is not informed to the specific processing, then it can never be valid consent.
Exactly. So, and so that's very important collaboration in the ecosystem, where we need to be educating the public about the rights and what consent means. Actually, I want to end with Côte d'Ivoire. Les autorités de protection des données disposent-elles aujourd'hui de la capacité institutionnelle, juridique, technique et opérationnelle nécessaire pour élaborer des règlements fondés sur les lois et assurer l'application effective à grande échelle? My question is, given the limited capacity of data protection authorities in Africa, I've never met a data protection authority that said we have excess capacity. They're always saying we're understaffed, we don't have the resources to take cases. What do you think? Do you really have the power to impose and apply the data protection laws, or you're just looking for a big case to make an example of? Côte d'Ivoire, est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner votre perspective sur ces points-là?
J'ai perdu la tradition, mais j'ai cru comprendre. Est-ce que les autorités de protection de données à caractère personnel ont le pouvoir nécessaire pour pouvoir...
la capacité.
La capacité nécessaire pour exécuter les dispositions de la loi?
Oui.
Je dirais oui, oui et non. Okay. Oui, dans la mesure où la plus grande partie des textes de loi donnent des pouvoirs assez énormes aux autorités de protection des données. Malheureusement, je pense qu'au niveau des capacités financières et aussi des capacités en termes d'indépendance, beaucoup de nos autorités africaines souffrent un peu de ce pouvoir-là. Parce qu'appliquer une décision suppose une certaine indépendance. Il y a des fois où il peut y avoir des interactions entre de grosses firmes administratives et les autorités de protection des données. Il peut y avoir des contingences politiques qui freinent bien souvent la force et le pouvoir des autorités de protection des données. Mis à part cela, les sanctions peuvent être prises, donc des sanctions pécuniaires, des sanctions administratives et même, je dirais, des dénonciations auprès du procureur de la République pour des sanctions pénales. le pouvoir d'enquête, le pouvoir de contrôle, les autorités de protection l'ont. Mais ça ne peut s'appliquer que dans certaines situations.
Merci beaucoup. In this panel, it was a 40-minute panel, but in this panel, we only scratched the surface. My objective was not to resolve issues. My objective is to help bring them up to the surface. And what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to do with my colleagues on the panel, is to emphasize that having laws is not enough. We can't just say, yes, it's a checklist. Having built collection mechanisms of data is not enough. I think we're very far in this dialogue. We're very far from establishing on-the-ground practices that protect people but also advance the economies forward. We have to have the courage to talk about these issues among ourselves, not just in public forums like this, but to collaborate among ourselves and be in continuously looking for the objective. The objective is empowering people to live their lives with dignity and at the same time supporting the progress, social and economic progress in the country. So please join me in thanking this panel. I want to move this panel forward. I have another panel coming up. I will keep DG Odusote on the stage because you are on this next panel. I will thank Uganda, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, I want to bring to the stage the final panel before lunch, and this will involve Ethiopia, please, to the stage, Morocco to the stage, and of course, Odusote, our DG, on the panel. Put up a poll, please, and I will just set up the situation. We have a small poll just to keep you engaged. The model we have discussed so far has largely been centralized. You've been hearing about it. Everybody's doing centralized API, verification through national system API. But this is beginning to change. Digital wallets, verifiable credentials, and offline verification through tokens such as electronic ID are leading to new trust architectures and creating new opportunities for how digital identity is used and verified. This could lower the cost, could enhance the data protection, could solve many things. Decentralization of trust is a topic worthy of our attention. So maybe everything I've done so far was to show you that the fault lines in the existing models, the cost, the challenges of data protection, and how effective and ineffective they are. Now, this raises fundamental questions. If trust becomes decentralized, what is the role of the state? If credentials move, what anchors authority? I mean, what's the role of identity authorities? What's the role of the government? And if verification no longer depends on central systems, how do we sustain the model? So with us here, we have the heads of 3 identity authorities, diverse, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Morocco, 3 countries who have advanced in very different ways towards decentralization. I want to start let's start with Ethiopia. Is decentralization of identity verification a capability you are developing?
Yes. Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, ID is not about documentation, right? ID is about establishing a trust framework. And trust can be established in a centralized way, as well as in a decentralized way. I don't believe any one country, especially a big country such as ours, can solve the trust framework, the trust ecosystem issue just by going down one route. Some use cases require centralized ecosystems, some others require offline, and some decentralized. Every country, including developed countries, everyone is navigating how to go about. So we're not sticking to one model. We're not saying every authentication that happens in Ethiopia has to be online and centralized, but we're not eliminating it. So it's a hybrid approach that we're following. We have a decentralized ecosystem, verifiable credential ecosystem that we're rolling out. But at the same time, we have a very active, we have about 2 million KYC requests every day from the centralized approach.
So you're basically opening up a new channel, which is a decentralized channel.
Yeah.
What's the percentage? So far, I mean, it's small right now, but it will be growing most probably.
Yeah, it's our belief. Some use cases really can make use of the decentralized approach. Oftentimes, we talk about trust when we talk about decentralized, we talk about privacy when we talk about decentralized approach. For us, for instance, let me give you one example. The Ethio-Djibouti Railway, which is a railway company, they use the FIDA online ecosystem to give you railway tickets. Now, because of the robustness of the decentralized approach, they prefer to have it not because of privacy, not because of other considerations, but online means, cable may break, infrastructure may go down. So they believe that decentralized is more robust for these types of approaches. So not only trust that drives decentralized.
That drives their decision. DG Odusote, look at the poll behind you. I'm sorry, it may be difficult to read, so let me read it for you. So we asked sort of, as identity systems evolve, how should trust be managed? And it seems that the overwhelming majority says hybrid model. State anchors trust, ecosystem distributes it. Remain centralized under government system, gradually move toward decentralized model. Seems to be competing with the two. Is there anything that surprises you about this poll? Do you agree with, which one would you agree with and why?
I agree with the hybrid model approach. So that's exactly what we've done in Nigeria. So the state anchors the trust. However, we have decentralized via the digital credentials for the users to also have access over control of their data. So what we have actually done at NIMSI is to ensure that we work very closely with the Data Protection Agency in Nigeria Commission. So we're not against each other. We actually work together because don't forget that all NIMSI staff are users of the NI too, so we're also citizens. So we must also ensure that we protect citizens whilst ensuring that the government is able to drive its programs across board.
Okay. Yedju, quelle est votre vision sur la décentralisation? Vous avez choisi un autre modèle. Quel rôle l'identité régalienne sera dans ce modèle? Et quel est le modèle que vous allez appliquer pour la vérification d'identité? Parce que vous avez émis l'identité électronique qui peut servir comme identité décentralisée. Alors, expliquez-nous la vision du Maroc sur la décentralisation.
Ça ne surprendra personne. Le Maroc a fait le choix de la décentralisation, d'avoir un schéma identitaire décentralisé. Pourquoi? Pour deux choses. Tout d'abord, comme on en parle souvent, c'est pour des raisons de sécurité, de protection de données personnelles et sécurité de ces données-là. Ça va de soi. Mais surtout que nous avons vu que c'était l'évolution normale de l'usage qui était fait de l'identité en tant que telle dans le Maroc. Je m'explique. Depuis toujours, l'usage de l'identité a été lié à la carte nationale. La carte nationale représentait l'identité des citoyens. Et cet usage-là accompagnait le citoyen dans toute cette transaction dans le monde physique, c'est-à-dire me déplacer dans des guichets, dans des banques, etc. Donc j'étais déjà en mode décentralisé, mais physiquement. Je devais donner ma carte, montrer ma carte, me présenter, m'identifier. L'usage a toujours été décentralisé. Ce que nous avons fait uniquement, c'est digitaliser cet usage-là, c'est-à-dire utiliser une identité forte, légalement forte, et qui était reconnue, ancrée un petit peu dans tout l'écosystème physique des citoyens marocains. Nous l'avons étendue dans un usage digital. C'est-à-dire que
nous avons laissé le contrôle des données aux citoyens là, à une seule différence, c'est que la carte ne représentait plus l'identité du citoyen, mais ça s'est transformé en clé, une clé. Ça peut être des credentials, ça peut être des facteurs d'authentification, mais c'est la clé du citoyen pour l'usage de tous les services identitaires de l'État.
Ok, très bien. Mais l'État retient le contrôle de l'issuance, le contrôle, l'enrôlement et l'émission des cartes.
Oui, effectivement. L'État, dans le passé, le rôle de l'État, le rôle de l'autorité d'identité, dans le passé, se terminait à la remise de la carte nationale. Là, l'État, son rôle commence à l'émission de la carte nationale. L'État devient ce qu'on peut dire le concept de l'État comme service. Donc,
Oui.
la remise de la carte nationale est devenue maintenant le début de sa relation avec le citoyen.
Merci beaucoup. Yodehe, let's go into the future. Identity is not a business of 1 day or 10 days. I can tell you, I started in the identity space when I was 20 years old. So you can estimate how long I've been in it. It's been 40 years for me in this identity. So, and I expect 40 more years, many of you, some of you may continue to be there. Identity is a lifelong journey. So let's go into the future, far, 5, 10 years into the future. What do you think will be driving the need for decentralization?
So there is certain level of convenience when it comes to centralized authentication from the citizen's perspective. Because decentralized means, number one, you probably need a smartphone, you need certain level of digital literacy, you need to know how to fetch your verifiable credential from your phone and offer it to the service provider for verification. It could be an online system, it could be an in-person service delivery. But as as time goes on, for instance, in Ethiopia, we're seeing rural farmers learning how to use a smartphone despite their level of literacy. So as time goes on, smartphone penetration increases, most people are using digital services. I believe centralized authentication will take more and more central place in how authentication works.
What's your projection? Let's just be estimating. What would be the daily volume of identity authentications if all goes according to plans? Are we talking about 100 million, 10 million transactions a day?
What would limit it is, number one, business considerations, obviously. We have, for instance, in Ethiopia, we have the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. They are already linked to us, and they do, on an average day, they may do up to 1 million per day, 1 million authentication, because today it's free.
Right.
But tomorrow, say we put some money on it, then they will say, okay, we'll not do authentication for the majority of the cases if it doesn't make commercial sense. But today we're doing about 2 million, and we're still a relatively young program. If the commercial aspect is going well, you can make money as an enterprise or as an ID authority that wants to make revenue. You can generate revenue from both centralized and decentralized
Yes.
authentications. So that being said, I can see in the case of Ethiopia, tens of millions per day if everything works.
Now, listen to what he said. Tens of millions of transactions per day. What about scalability? Decentralization solves the problem of scalability immediately. If you're doing tens of millions of transactions a day, you're going to have to build servers, electricity, air conditioning to do that. How do you see scalability in the decentralization favor?
Yeah, one reason we want to go to the decentralized route is because we want to take the stress off of our teams, because 1 hour the national ID centralized authentication ecosystem doesn't work for whatever reason. It means 1 hour of stress for everyone involved, hundreds of parties, hundreds of agencies not being able to verify. It could be internet is out, it could be anything.
Yes.
So centralized authentication creates unnecessary level of dependency on one centralized database or data center. So the reason why we want to go to the decentralized route, in addition to the privacy considerations, is the ability to have a robust authentication ecosystem.
Scaling becomes a very, very important point. So that's another issue. Decentralization is not just a good idea, it's coming. So we have to learn how to use it. We're not saying self-sovereign identity. We're saying identity that's official identity issued by the state but used by the public. Let me go to Nigeria. Nigeria, have you gone down the path of issuing wallets, or are you planning on issuing wallets, digital wallets for identity management?
So we do have the digital credentials wallet ID that we've done. And what we have done at the moment is we are going to launch the component that has all the wallets in one place. So we're looking at driver's license, the passport integrations, so you can have all your digital ID in one place. But we have actually launched the NINO.
The digital credentials
Yes.
will be issued. When are you planning on doing that?
So the digital credentials are being issued at the moment, but there's another component of it which will be able to allow all your IDs be on that part. But the wallet has been issued yet. That was
And-
done last Q4 with the president launching it.
Is NIMSI the one in charge of the wallet, or is it the ICT ministry in charge of the wallet?
It's NIMSI under the Ministry of Interior. So
Okay.
we are actually under Interior and not the Digital Economy, ICT Ministry.
Okay, so the wallet is already in your horizon, it's already there. I assume just yes or no, Ethiopia, the same thing, the wallet is there, right? Yadju, Maroc, est-ce que le portefeuille numérique est quelque chose au-delà de l'identité électronique? Est-ce que le Maroc pense émettre de wallet?
Alors, je vais peut-être vous surprendre avec ma réponse, mais la mise en place d'un portefeuille numérique souverain, c'est comme ça que nous l'appelons, est en phase de test aujourd'hui, un test restreint au niveau de la DGSN, et sa mise en place interviendra pendant le mois de mai, justement, de cette année.
Excellent. So the Morocco, even though they have an electronic ID, they will be issuing digital wallets, which is now under testing in pilot phase. Let me go back to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, let's be explicit. Does your business model change if verification is no longer centralized but passes through the wallet? Are you making money the same, whether it's through the wallet or through the API?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, centralized is the most straightforward way of doing accounting or
Right.
doing, all of this, the financial, the billing. Monthly billing is much easier when it's online and API, and you see real time what the agency, how many authentications they've done. But there's always a workaround. There's an architecture for billing in a decentralized way while maintaining privacy. So that's what we're planning to do in Ethiopia with the wallet ecosystem.
So for you, there will be no disruption to your revenue stream by going to the wallet.
Yeah, on the wallet, on the online one, it's only KYC. On the wallet, there is also a second revenue stream called convenience fee. So, say for instance, the driver's license example mentioned by Nigeria. Someone is accessing their driver's license on their wallet. It's more convenient, so they're willing to pay some extra amount to be issued that driver's license or to verify it. So we plan to introduce, in fact, the second revenue stream called convenience fee for the decentralized model.
Nigeria, the same question, but elaborate on the impact of the wallet on your future business.
So the wallet doesn't actually affect our revenue stream, but what it does is actually to drive up the revenue that we already have. Because now what we have done is increase citizen participation through the wallet. So which means that citizens will be carrying out more transactions by the wallet, and those will definitely drive up because they're able to do that. So if you have decentralized, like the way we have done in Nigeria, we're able to generate more revenue, and that's what we're looking at. So at the moment, I would say that before we launched, we were doing an average of 3 million API calls a day. but now it's gone up to about 10 million API calls on a bad day. So because of increased citizen participation through the wallet, we're able to drive up that number.
Drive the revenue. Actually, this is one of the questions that I get asked a lot, which is a lot of identity authorities are worried that a transition to the wallet is going to destroy the revenue stream. But in reality, it's the opposite. API-based verifications is not the only way for you to generate the revenue. You can do it through the wallets. I know systems where you can also sell trust tokens to the relying parties, and every time they do a verification of identity, they're counting down the transactions that they've done it. So you don't even know who who ended up getting identity verification for what purposes, but it's the relying parties' responsibility, and they will pay for it through this counter. So there are very good mechanisms, and tomorrow we're going to hear about the eIDAS 2.0 model, plus the UID models on identity verification through wallets. So let's pay attention to those because they are the future. Actually, I want to go to Morocco because Morocco has taken a different approach towards identity. Le Maroc considère l'identité comme un outil ou comme un élément régalien. C'est l'État qui est responsable pour émettre ça. Je n'ai jamais entendu le Maroc parler de business model. I never heard Morocco talk about the business model to support the identity authorities. So how do you see, Yaju, how do you see your future, the future of the identity authority, in a country where you view identity as a business of the state, not as something that can be made into an enterprise?
Alors, bonne remarque, vous avez raison. Nous avons expliqué à plusieurs reprises que nous ne voyons pas pour le moment l'opportunité de mettre en place un modèle financier pour soutenir la plateforme, bien que cela est en train de changer. Nous pensons vraiment que c'est un rôle de l'État, c'est un rôle régalien de l'État, celui de la gestion de l'identité de ses citoyens et de sa protection. Et ce que nous avons mis en place en termes de mécanismes, de vérification de l'identité, en termes de partage de données, nous ont permis maintenant que la réflexion a commencé, déjà de mettre cette plateforme de tiers de confiance au niveau national, qui a été reconnue par le ministère de la Transition numérique comme DPI et qui fait partie de la stratégie numérique Maroc 2030, ce qui nous a permis d'avoir du financement de l'État, négocié avec le ministère de la Transition numérique et le ministère des Finances pour la partie gouvernementale. Aujourd'hui, les 2/3 de l'usage de la plateforme, il est gouvernemental pour les services e-gov. Et nous sommes en train de commencer à discuter avec les différents partenaires privés pour que le service de vérification soit rémunéré à partir de la prochaine version, justement, du passage à la version wallet, du passage à la version du portefeuille électronique, ce qui nous a permis, justement, ces mécanismes-là nous facilitent un petit peu la mise en place de ce modèle financier parce que nous étions déjà, depuis 3 ans, sur un modèle d'identité et de vérificateur. Vous savez, aujourd'hui, nous sommes, encore une fois, je le répète, sur un modèle décentralisé et chaque fournisseur de services, chaque partenaire, qu'il soit public ou État, pour accéder aux données des citoyens, devait passer par un process de prérequis qui passait par, comme le Nigeria, par l'autorité de protection des données personnelles, par la DGCC pour la vérification des portails et la conformité de sécurité des systèmes d'information. Donc ce process qui a déjà été mis en place va nous permettre un petit peu pour enrôler justement les fournisseurs de services qui souhaitent faire de la vérification d'identité, qui pourra être pour le secteur privé, notamment pour les banques, les assurances, qui pourra être rémunéré. Et c'est une nouveauté parce que nous n'avions jamais mis en place de tels mécanismes dans le passé.
Okay. Okay, so there will be a register of relying parties, and those will be vetted, and they will be actually given access after they have been authorized by the state to be in the register. This is similar to the European model you will hear about tomorrow. Yurehe, I want to end with you. I'm intrigued because you went from a project to already becoming a state-owned enterprise, like Ethiopian Airlines, for example, Ethiopian Telecom. Are we looking at the next Ethiopian Airlines success story here?
Inshallah, yeah.
Inshallah.
Why not?
Inshallah. So explain to us, you came in as a project, where are you now?
Yeah, we're in the process of transitioning right now. We had, first when we launched it, we only had government budget, government treasury, and then World Bank funding came around 2024. When World Bank funding came, we had about 5 million people with digital IDs. So the funding really helped us scale up very fast. Now we reached 43 million. And, government is giving this enterprise in kind and sometimes in cash, initial capital to launch and to scale up. So hopefully we'll be able to sustain ourselves, help us innovate, and help us retain talent, which is also an important aspect of becoming an SOE.
That's exactly right. I mean, by becoming a state-owned enterprise, you're able to compete with the private sector, you're able to pay salaries that are not subjected to the standard civil servant grades that exist. So there are a lot of reasons to focus on institutional reform, and it's very interesting to see this journey, how fast it progressed for certain countries. Okay, I think we should reach the end here. I think we recovered from this morning's last-minute disruption, but I think it was well worth it. We recovered the schedule. Now we can go back on the same normal schedule. I want you, please, to be back here at 3:30. You have an hour and a half lunch. It's a late lunch, but it's good. Hour and a half. We're going to start with Minister of ICT from Sierra Leone, a very young and dynamic minister, Minister Ba. So please do not miss that. Then we're going to continue with a fireside chat with Stella Mocamp from the World Bank. You all have many things on your mind about how do we do with the development agenda. So we're going to have a very deep conversation. Then we're going to have ICT authorities bringing their perspective about their role, what they can bring to the identity agenda. And then, of course, we're going to caution you because AI is coming and quantum computing is coming. And so no sooner have we gotten things under control, we're starting to see things on the horizon that menace and that threaten our progress. But with wide eyes and with complete awareness, we will continue to advance together. So I thank you very much for this day so far, and please come back. Please thank the panelists. And then for the ambassadors of ID for Africa, please come to the stage. There will be a family photo. Pour les ambassadeurs de ID for Africa, veuillez venir sur scène, s'il vous plaît, pour la photo de la famille. Merci beaucoup. Yes, the ambassadors, you stay because you are ambassadors. So thank you very much. Yes, yes. Ambassadors, deputy ambassadors, anybody who is member of the bureau, the big family, please come.